What's up guys, Almighty Anime here, and in this video, we'll be going over a list of top 10 manhwa to read. So, straight off, for those of you who don't know, a manhwa is the Korean version of comics and is colorized and are mostly found online in certain websites that have been translated for your viewing pleasure. Manhwa are very entertaining to read for people who enjoy manga or comics in general and provide an alternative. Now, the selections made in this video were personal opinions from the ones I read and enjoyed the most. These are the ones that stood apart from all the other ones and had me immersed in the story and wanting more. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe and comment down below if you have any favorites that weren't included in this list. Now, without further ado, let's start with the first one. FFF Class Trash Hero. This takes your usual isekai genre plot where a student gets sent to another world and has to adapt, blah blah blah, become a hero, save the world, and it turns it into something more cynical, as this manhwa is a parody of the genre and portrays what happens when the protagonist just simply wants to get back home to Earth and after many failed attempts to do so, has snapped. The art style really fits in with the overarching premise, allowing for comedic and downright cool panels as well. When reading this, I enjoyed how this manhwa took the story in a completely opposite way that you don't normally see, and it worked. The plot and the urge of the main character to get back to his normal life on Earth drove him to be self-centered and selfish, not caring for others, and it just made for a really fun read in general. The plot would make it sound dark and twisted, and don't get me wrong, it is at certain points, but there is comedy that makes it bounce back and really ensnares its readers with a good balance between the two. Next is Murim Login, which has a story and a concept so unique it's the first I've read of its kind. Now, there are many manhwas out there that follow the narrative of the world experiencing an outbreak of monsters that are coming from dungeons that are appearing and people become hunters to combat them. We've heard it all before, we've read it all before, but now, the twist in this manhwa is that the main character receives a VR gaming rig that when he enters it sends him to the world of Murim, which is basically fantasy Asian martial arts, and whatever he learns and trains for in there, he also receives them in the real world. The story does a really good job in getting you enticed with the protagonist and his doings in the Murim world, but then they pull you out and introduce you to what's happening in the real world, and as you switch back and forth, the story never seems to slow down or get boring, and it's quite the contrary. The story just keeps getting better and better as the protagonist gets stronger from switching back and forth. This manhwa was very exciting to read, as you could see the MC put in the hard work in the Murim world and for it to be reciprocated in the real world as he rises in rank from an F rank hunter to, I'm not going to spoil it, but yeah, he just gets stronger. Now for Leviathan. Oh boy, was this an absolute marvel to read. This is an example of a really well written and designed manhwa with a great world setting that has a plot seen through to the end. From the very beginning, where you're introduced to the world and the characters, you are instantly hooked because due to experiencing tragedy after tragedy, you see great character development that just makes everyone in the story feel so alive. The concept of the story alone was enough for me to read from start to finish all 214 chapters in one sitting. Of course, before I get ahead of myself, the synopsis of the story is that Earth has become a post-apocalyptic wasteland due to the seawater rising because of a meteor that hit Earth, causing it to rain non-stop. Humanity has all resorted to living on giant boats or floating towns and even mounds of trash floating on the surface because it is a death sentence to enter the water as it is inhabited by giant sea creatures and monsters that devour humans. Now what makes this so interesting is how in order to ensure their survival, there are people called harpoonists that are tasked to explore the waters and scavenge for resources by delving deep into the depths of the hostile waters where they can be attacked at any second. Every time a character had to enter the water, it would always put me on edge and it would garner a sense of uneasiness until they got back to the surface because of how scary the setting and atmosphere of the ocean was. I'm not gonna say anymore, except let you see for yourself how good this manhwa is, because me sitting here explaining it will do it no justice. Up next is Return of the Mount Hua Sect, which during the era of Murim follows the story of one of the three greatest swordsmen of his time dying in a final battle against the demonic sect and being reborn 100 years later, where the name of the sect he belonged to, Mount Hua Sect, has fallen. The art style is very nice and the story is easy to follow, and the actions that the protagonist does are all for the prosperity and return of his sect, as he uses his new life to surpass his previous self and restore the fame of Mount Hua. We get to see a story that doesn't involve the main character being overly OP at the start by, one-shotting everyone himself. Rather, in this manhwa, we get to see the protagonist use the people around him and the people of the sect and knowledge from his past life to help him in his goals by training those around him and helping renovate the broken down sect. This was just refreshing for me to read, and the way the story progressed was satisfactory and was overall a nice experience. Definitely one of the slower paced yet immersive stories yet. Now, halfway through the list, we have Hero Has Returned. While sharing the same isekai trope of people being transported to another world, and after saving said world, they return to Earth and live a happy life. But what if they weren't welcomed back and instead had no one to rely on and couldn't fit back into society? After being stuck in another world for so long, the so-called heroes that returned had no way of integrating back into the flow of the world, so what do? They used the powers they obtained to absolutely destroy Earth and go on a rampage by killing everybody and occupying countries for themselves, enslaving the people who survived. The story does really well in showing how mentally deranged the so-called heroes are and how far they've fallen from humanity. Of course, this manhwa is very linear in the sense that our protagonist also gets turned into a hero, and unlike the others, he has come to avenge his fallen family, who was killed in the rampages, so one by one he hunts down the so-called heroes to kill them and restore peace to Earth. Next is SSS Class Suicide Hunter, and this manhwa is top tier for sure. With being true to its name, the protagonist has the ability to go back in time one day if he is killed, and he gains an ability of whoever kills him. Now, in the first place, to have obtained this ability, he was filled with endless amounts of jealousy and self-loathing for being weak, so much so that he was granted his suicide ability by the gods above. He meets the top hunter, and after learning that the number one guy was a selfish, egotistical man that was basically a villain, he couldn't do anything about it. So, what is the only logical thing to do in his situation? He kills himself over and over and over and over again, about 1,000 times until he gets back to when the number one hunter was just starting out as a rookie, and yeah, go read it yourself to find out what happens next. The first few chapters got me hooked, and the story progresses very well and smoothly, and is very enjoyable to read with a neat art style and cool main character. Despite having such a strong ability, he doesn't abuse it by getting himself killed all the time, because he does still feel the pain of getting stabbed or slitting his throat, etc. And to be honest, it must suck having to die in general, so yeah, only when necessary does he use his ability to turn back time one day. Now on to The Beginning After the End. This one is another top tier manhwa I highly recommend reading, with a really well done plot that balances everything nicely between action and story. The plot revolves around a mighty yet lonely king named Gray who died and was reincarnated as a baby named Arthur, and decides to live his life differently and try to be loved by those close to him to avoid his previous grim fate of dying alone. What makes this manhwa so good is how well done the pacing is, and how the protagonist steadily becomes stronger, yet not too powerful at the start, making fight scenes fun and entertaining to read. There is serious character development here, and being able to see Arthur grow is a big part in the story, making this manhwa exceptional. The chapters are quite long, so there is a lot of content to cover, so a lot of reading will be needed. However, it's definitely worth it for the experience. Speaking of underdogs, we have Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, which is another example of top-tier story writing and world building. The story follows our protagonist, who has the ability of knowledge that no one else has, giving him an overwhelming advantage in terms of strategy and finesse, rather than strength or power. He has to use his wits and intellect in order to become stronger, and is able to do so because before the world went apocalypse mode, Kim Dokja, our MC, read all the chapters of a certain webtoon of which emulated the apocalypse. So, as a result, he would have an understanding and know things others did not. I recommend anyone to read this. It's just an overwhelmingly good manhwa to read with no plot holes or flaws whatsoever. Lastly is Skeleton Soldier Who Couldn't Protect the Dungeon, which definitely deserves to be on this list as it was a manhwa that kept me captivated so much like Leviathan, I completed it in one sitting despite the 100 or so chapters. The plot revolves around a skeleton who is resurrected by a necromancer and must find out his purpose and regain his memories of who he was before death. The whole series is shrouded in mystery, with chapters leaving questions that the reader wants answered, but never gets so until further in the story. The plot might seem vague at times, and the story wanders off in directions that'll make you go, what the hell? But continue on and read the chapters till completion, and you will not regret it. I won't say too much about this, but it is definitely something you have to read because of how good it is. That's it for this list of manhwa to read. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and if you agree with some of the choices on this list. Thank you for watching. This has been Almighty Anime. Till next time.